Just a very small detail, we were talking about it with Johannes. He told us that there are 4 different writing systems in China. There is a 5th one. It's a very interesting story. It's called the Nushu script, and it's a secret writing system only practiced by women. The women used it on purpose not to be understood by men. In the late 18th century, I guess, it's a syllabary. It's already encoded, and this is a specific case because it's actually not a missing script because it's already encoded, but it's a missing font. There are code points. Everything is all set, but there is not a single font available today for the Nushu script. So, type designers, feel free to add one. Yeah.
There is one. Microphone's coming.
Yeah. So, if you have any, any details, feel free. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful! This is Nushu script. Yeah.
So I've been working with the script for about more than a year now.
Yeah.
And it's quite recent.
It's
so
wonderful.
It's actually down from a local calligrapher.
Yeah.
She's one of the inheriting calligrapher from the community, and they have now designed a font that is being also incorporated with Unicode.
So
Wonderful.
So there's one font.
There is one font available now.
Yeah. Since when?
It's, I think, since probably earlier this year.
Okay. So it's no longer missing. It's a good news. Yeah. I love this moment. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's great news. Yeah. Thank you so much. We are looking forward to see it and to know more about this writing system.
I'm not a designer myself, but the whole story and the historical context of the script is very interesting.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
now it's more of a cultural heritage because the girls and the boys are going to the same school.
Yeah.
So they are not traditionally practicing the script anymore. But it is preserved, and we have the Unicode, which is really, really important.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of documents that needs to be digitalized.
Yeah.
So a lot of poems and sing-songs that the women were writing to each other in the script. And these are also very... It's very vernacular in its own way, so it's always quite sort of daily conversations, but it's also very relevant for the region and for the people to preserve these documents. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Wonderful.
You very much.
Thank you.
So there are 5 Chinese scripts.
Yeah.
As far as we know.
Mm.
Any other comments from the audience over there? Questions about Deborah's presentation as well? Yeah, there's one over there.
No.
Just raising the arm.
One question here.
My question is about after doing research and putting them into data, and what standards do you use in categorization? So I presume in form or geographical commonalities, or in time, but also writing directions. Would you are looking into variations of categorizations to maybe perhaps then you find unsought patterns, tendencies, or some kind of scenography in shape.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my question in the categorization of it.
Actually, it's the trickiest part of. It depends on any project, any writing system has its own specificities, but we often face this kind of problem of categorization and systematization, because we all know that typography is a very systematic approach to forms, and often scholars want to preserve as many variations as possible, and for the scientificity of the drawings and the glyph shapes. For instance, in Egyptian hieroglyphs, if you ask Egyptologists, you will have 10 or 30,000 of glyphs with each variation for each location and each period. So it's tricky to find a kind of middle ground, common ground together to have a more synthetic approach, because of course there are a difference between the character and the role of Unicode in a very abstract way, and the glyphs, the visual representation of these characters, and what should be encoded as a different character, and what should be just a glyph variation inside a single font or another font, for instance. So this kind of categorization is extremely tricky all the time. And for the first project I presented about the old monetary coins, this kind of ontology of different structure of Latin letters, for instance, it was as well very interesting discussions with scholars to identify where lie the differences between these structures. What is a detail, like a serif or something added to the structure, and what is a meaningful change of structure inside even a Latin letter, you know. And so it's, we are always working on that, and there is not one single answer to it. It's we always have to deal with this difference of behavior between our two disciplines. I don't know if I answered the question, but I did my best. Thank you. Anyway,
I have an associated question.
Yeah. This
may be a rude question because you're all designers and visual designers too. Yeah. So, and my question is about like transcription, and that these a lot of these scripts are visualizations of oral spoken culture. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you discuss? Like what gets lost in the process of, like, language is not only a system of independent individual signs. Mm-hmm. They are contextual. They also have a materiality. Even Deborah also mentioned that the keyboards are very important. Keyboards, that means to me mechanization, right? Mm-hmm. It's a kind of industrialization of language. So is that okay, maybe that's the stage we're in, but is that something that people discuss when you're working through these languages?
I consider this is not at our level, it's more a linguist approach, this relationship between the spoken word and the written word. We only come after, but in terms of transcriptions, even in their visual forms, there are different levels of transcriptions depending on what you are looking to. And it's really important to provide different different means, different tools to achieve these different levels of transcriptions. And scholars talk about diplomatic transcriptions, and what will be a diplomatic transcription to be as close as possible to the source, but with an encoded text, and that should be interesting. Pierre.
I'd like to add something, especially about hieroglyphs. It's that I think our role as designers is to question the uses of the typeface we design, because when you work, as it was my case, with researchers, they often don't know themselves what they're using their typeface for, and especially in the case of hieroglyphs, if you consider that you're just producing a representation of another text, it doesn't matter if it's a normalized transcription. It's okay because it just has to refer to something else. But and it's mainly the problem of figuration. What are you designing for whom? And it's questions that are often not enough raised by researchers, linguists themselves. So.
Can I ask the same question of Emilie, because she's working on mostly, kind of these difficult questions of colonization and systematization.
Well, language is a questioning I am just interested just now. So I said that was a Creolian, an English Creolian, and the sources as you had was related by English people or Dutch people. So the transcription in writing wasn't exactly the same. The Wahai become J in my sources. So I'm actually questioning that, but I'm lucky because I could listen a little bit on video on YouTube, for example, some music of Jioka people. So I'm just working on it to see, because it seems that I have to be very careful about it. And for all the documents I'm writing about the script, you see that I just translate it in Latin according to my sources, but maybe I will add some translation with the very les syllabaires. Les alphabets vocaux pour dire phonetic. Phonetic alphabetic. I will translate it because it will express maybe a better views for everybody to see what each glyph corresponding of. But this is not exactly the same problematic that for hieroglyphs, for example, because we are on a very young writing system, so and living actually.
But the good point is that there is at least for Africa, there is a guy who is a chief of this writing system. So it's a very reliable source, a guy who decides what's good or not. Michael?
Well, hello? Well, no. The right way to do... Okay, the reason that Afaka and Loma have not been encoded is that as writing systems intended for use with modern languages, they are defective. They're not suitable for writing everything that they say. The Vi alphabet was modified long after its original origins to add dots and things and strokes and stuff to certain of the syllabic, babe, bibo, boo, they did some, or sase, siso, su, they did something to each of those to make it zaze, zizo, zu, because they needed z. Well, Njuka needs a z. And some years ago, I told Andre about this, and I said, look, your language has a syllabic matrix, and the inherited original scripts invented by the guy who dreamt about it or whatever, because they always dream about them. Always. And he just hasn't done it. He added those 6 things, but that was ages and ages ago. So our colleague in Trinidad is trying to get, he was trying to get some funding so that we can actually go to Suriname and have a seminar with the whole user community, not the guy who's the boss, because the guy who's the boss didn't understand it. He didn't understand what we were saying. You have to have, you could choose not to fill these out, and if you want to use be and pe, but not pa, only ba, well, you could do but it's defective, and if they want this to compete with the Latin alphabet, which it will in Suriname, they're going to have to make it suitable to be able to do everything it does, including a mark for prenasalization, a mark for postnasalization, a mark to kill the vowel in case it comes at the end of a word or a syllable or something, because my name is not Everesoni, right? It'll need to be marked so that you can do that, because they can pronounce these things because they're multilingual and all of that. The Loma alphabet, the Loma script is in West Africa is the same sort of thing. I could talk for a long time. I do think that it is a very bad idea to try to go and talk about writing systems in terms of colonization and decolonialization and all sorts of abstract. It's ink or blood marking on bark or paper or something, and those marks are abstract and may or may not refer to anything in the real world, and they may or may not have a good or a less good association with any particular phonemes, but, well, alphabets are not magic. I'm not going to...
So for living script, the thing apparently are always moving. And do you see a difference when you write the proposal for ancient writing system or living writing system? Is it always like for the AFACA, the thing are moving and it's not? I don't know.
It's not fixed yet.
Yeah, not fixed yet.
Johannes thinks that Latin is finished.
Yeah, it's not finished.
It's not finished, and I keep adding things. I'm doing a whole lot of work with medieval paleography in Britain, and we did a whole lot of additions for Latin for European paleography, but nobody was really paying much attention to Britain. And I'm finding things from Cornwall all the way to Scotland where there's stuff, and I'm having, well, as we will talk about later, problems getting them to understand why it's important to add these things. But, you know, even one of the things that I try to explain to the Unicode Technical Committee, which is, as Deborah Anderson said in her talk, is a lot of people who work for companies who are concerned about counting the beans, which is why we keep adding emojis, because emojis make them money. I don't know where the money goes. You know, to try to explain to them that just because some people are dead doesn't make any difference. They're dead. We're the ones who actually want to use these writing systems or not. The Egyptian problem is a real problem because you've got 4,000 years of people.
Thank you.
Next question.
Questions out there? Oh, there's many questions. Oh, well, that aroused many. That was a very good intervention there. So, let's go back and then we'll go into the back. Please, who else was?
I think my question is maybe a bit related. So, for example, for me, like the New Shu script, which is kind of a deviation of the standard Chinese characters. And I think there are also many deviations of writing system. For example, when the Chinese character got simplified into hiragana of Japanese, there's different variations of how it was actually written. And when, I mean, of course, now we have the standardized Unicode is a standardized form of writing. And like, what is the point? Like, when are we counting a deviation as also a system? Because it is a system itself.
Yeah, it's when there's a semantic difference.
You know, Unicode keep track of this evolution because all the writing systems are in a way connected, and all these writing systems are recorded and integrated to Unicode. So I think it keeps Unicode keeps track of it as much as it can. So, but again, the problem is how to deal with variation inside the writing system for a unique character reference When do you consider this is a different character or a different glyph? And this is most. And there is as well, for instance, I can talk about this project. At first, Morgane, when she was the INRT, started to work on a Nigerian ideographic script called NCBD, and it's not a script, it's not a writing system, and this was very interesting to consider.
There is still discussion.
Yeah, but in the end, it didn't seem like a good idea even to propose to encode this script. So there were many issues because it's almost secret and really linked to rituals and so on, involving different things than only to write something. And sometimes some manifestations, graphic manifestations, are not to be considered as authentic writing systems. So there are borders, and sometimes you're right between like painting or writing. This is not the same thing. So it's always interesting to consider this specific.
But for this, just for this example of NCBD is a bit complex because we talk about the old form of the NCBD. Now there is new actors who work on that and try to transcribe their language, and it's quite different. So there is still discussion about that. It's not fixed. For me, there is a real difference between the NCBD where you can find in the 9th century of old object and the NCBD that you can find now in Nigeria. But maybe.
We have another question in the back. We should.
Yes, thanks first of all for your intriguing projects and the presentations. They're very fascinating. What I would like to know a bit more about is, can you maybe tell us a bit about the approach of the inputting system? Like when you test fonts or the missing scripts, I suppose that most of them are not yet supported in many software environments. So do you come up with your own keyboard layout? Is it software dependent or software independent? Can it be used? So can you elaborate a bit more on this, please?
Maybe I can talk about. It's quite complex actually. So because the Unicode on the proposal, it's not fixed. Sometimes it's moved. They propose, if I say it's correct, in the proposal the Unicode is sometimes it's accurate, but sometimes it changes. Yeah, it's quite difficult actually. At the beginning, I made a mistake. For instance, I was using for the Aramaic, I was using the Unicode Hebrew for writing the text. But it was quite a mistake because after Unicode, I understood that. I see Michael laughing. Yeah, but we will work soon with Eric Reiner from Glyph because we work on Glyph to integrate the script as soon as possible in the software so we can really use it. But yeah, this is an issue.
Yeah, maybe sometimes we ask Glyph's team to build a custom layout system for us. But you're right to underline that designing the font is just the beginning. And there are several steps until a writing system reach its population. Do you remember you were here in Stanford 2 years ago? Neil Patel from Jamra Patel delivered a great talk about the process after the encoding of a new writing system, because it relies on, of course, keyboards, operating systems, and for some. For instance, his example was on African new writing system, and it takes years for the population to get access to it, because even if it's on the latest Unicode version, you have to download the latest OS, to have the latest smartphone, etc. There are several issues and economic issues, so it takes a long time. But I think that we should work more together. That was the point Morgan said at the end of her talk. Work together as type designer, linguist, and engineer on these topics. And earlier in the first stage of the proposals to go faster in this, because this time we are working one after the other, and there are mistakes, it's time consuming, and so on. So maybe we should work more closely together.
There were more questions?
Yeah, one more. I'd like to add something. And besides, maybe designing the font is the beginning of the issue, but in my opinion, the last problem is how to make people learning how to write the system in a digital computer. It's not especially the software. For example, I'd show you the manual de codage, and it's still in use because it uses both the Gardner's sign light and the transliteration of hieroglyphs. For example, in an instance, if you write a lowercase m, it's going to understand it as the sign of the whole because it's a transliteration of this sign. So, and the main problem for Egyptologists nowadays, it's okay, Unicode is going to make the extension and it's going to be powerful, but how are they going to learn a new code, a new syntax for the writing of the text? And it's a really big problem, especially when you're in a writing system that uses between 6,000 and 8,000 signs. So for this, we don't have the solution yet, but still using the Gardner's sign list. And it explains to why it's still the reference for the classification of hieroglyphs.
We have one last question.
Yes,
please.
I think that there are two aspects of being human that play too important a role in many people's lives today. The one is identity, and the other one is games. Both of these things come together in what we've been talking about today so far, because some scripts are revived because they sort of enhance the identity. This can be very meaningful in some cases. It can be power play in other cases. And then the games. Some scripts are invented because people would like to make something new. Sometimes it's a myth. Sometimes it's part of a literary work. Sometimes it's part of an artwork. And I'm seeing these fictional scripts slightly like approaching Unicode because they want to be confirmed in their existence. Do both these things, like an accent on identity or an accent on I've invented something, influenced your work? Or make it more difficult?
It depends a lot. Because yeah, you're right. Some writing systems are completely invented and brand new over the last century. If you see on the poster, the lower part is only for 19th and 20th century new writing systems. So it's still alive, and there are many scripts that are invented these days. And sometimes it came out of a dream. Sometimes it's a mythology. But it's important, this kind of story behind it is actually very important in the building of the identity. So these two parts of your question are extremely connected, I guess. As for instance, the story of the comet out of a dream to create an entire writing system. And in the end, this writing system is connecting these people and this culture. So yeah, I love the way it all came out of stories, you know, and yeah, I think it's quite poetic. Yeah.
I'm fairly sure that the
only conscripts, constructed language scripts that we have on the list for possible encoding are Tolkien's Tengwar and Kirth and then Bliss symbols, and there's reasons for that. One of those reasons, well, and then, but then we did encode Shavian. Klingon hasn't been encoded. There's copyright issues. Right? Tengwar and Kirth haven't been encoded because there's copyright issues. Okay. The question as to whether Klingon is suitable for encoding irritates the people who work for the big companies who won't lose any money if it worked. I don't want to get into that. It's interesting to see things like, I wanted to do the NCBD thing because when an ancient symbolic system used for tokening something, we don't know, but probably not language, is then taken up by newer people and made into something that will actually represent language. That's one thing. I noticed on your list you had the Vincha and the Tartaria stuff. Don't go anywhere near that. The only people who think that's actual writing, Maria Gimbutas thought it was proto-writing, which is fair. The only people who think it's actual writing are certain right-wing Hungarians who wish the world to believe that the Hungarians have been in the Carpathian Basin for 8,000 years, which they have not. But then, and I'm done, I'm almost done.
Perhaps I can.
But then on the other hand, you have the Indus Valley symbols, which two guys from Harvard wrote all this massive stuff saying that if you measure the length of all of these things, it could not possibly be language. And then you look at it and you say, no, there's 400 to 800 tokens here. And they're used for something. I don't know whether they're shipping labels or lists of ingredients or what. But if it does not have some kind of linguistic content, people couldn't use them for anything. And now we should have coffee and lunch.
Yeah, just to conclude the decision, if something is a writing system or not, we trust Dr. Deborah Anderson from Berkeley, and we heard these stories about one script who was used just for communicating between a father and his children, and they left it out. And I trust Dr. Deborah Anderson to do this, to have this decision.
So there's an oracle hovering above us. I'm sure that you all have a lot more questions, and there's a lot more discussion to have. We'll have that after our lunch break.